November the 6th, 2000, interview with Jean Barker, wife of Bill Barker, questions asked by Jim Burke and accompanied also by Bill Barker. Okay, I've already slated this as interviewing, so you go ahead.
Okay, well, we have about 6 or 7 kind of little vignettes or little just things you might want to ask Gene about that'll give you some clue. These are little anecdotes of things that happened in the early days of Bower Hill.
Okay.
One was the fact we had a lot of the meetings, the session, the deacons met back in our apartment back in 1950 and 51, 52, before we had the new building, the first building, and Gene talks about the baby there in the apartment. Our youngest, our brother, our son at that time was a baby, and the smoke. Everybody was smoking in those days. That's one. She can tell you about that. Another is the fact that we had the youth group in those early days over at our apartment. Gene fed them chili, and the only thing that they had to eat on was the good Lenox china. That's the only china we had.
We didn't have enough for everyday stuff.
Okay.
Another, she cleaned the building, and along with me and some of the other women in the very early days. This was the little white church days.
Mhm.
She was one of the first Sunday school teachers. She can talk about that. She was also in the first choir. She was instrumental in getting the Women's Association going way back when, and got that underway. Also can talk about a strawberry festival, the first strawberry festival we had in the little white church, including just the breaking of a prized dish of somebody brought up an antique bowl, and she can.
I remember that one. So.
And also one time she was in the choir loft for a meeting with John, our son, who guess there's no babysitter, and she was attending that meeting and couldn't get out. And the boy lost a tooth at that time and bled profusely. And these little episodes may want to work for something like that.
To Bill, he better just stay on in case there's something that comes up.
Okay. Well, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm going to run down some of my questions, and I'm going to try and feed yours in where they kind of fit, so to speak. In the beginning, as I guess is the appropriate way, what my email would have said was new bride, new location. Just kind of describe some of the experiences starting a new church from scratch, from your perspective.
Yeah, okay. Well, I know before, I think it was the day before I was married, I had a luncheon with my bridesmaids, and I was trying to tell them what we were doing, and they said, well, let's see the site. So we piled into cars and went clear out there to Parkview and got out of the Parkview Drive and got out, and there was just a big sign there saying this is the location of the new Presbyterian church. And the kids, the girls all said, well, there's a lady standing over there. Why don't you go talk to her? And so I went over and introduced myself because she looked kind of puzzled at what we were all doing. And I said, my husband-to-be is going to be the minister out here. And I said, I'd like to invite you to come in September for the first service or something. She looked so surprised. And it turned out to be Mabel Larry, and she and Ralph were charter members, actually.
Well, that's wonderful.
So they came, and that was when there was just a sign up there. And so then, of course, when the church got started, there was no custodian or anything, and people would say they wouldn't come if it was dirty on Sunday. So we started cleaning every Saturday, and finally, a group of women, I guess they felt sorry for us, and they came over, and we made a rotating, chart and we'd bring our own vacuums and dust cloths and everything up there on Saturday. So I said, when we became finally able to have a custodian, I really thought we had arrived. So
now I have to ask you, once that building was the little white church building, what I'll call the barracks building, was on site. What did you think the first time you opened the door?
Oh, well, it wasn't bad, but it was very small. And they fixed it up. We had a cross on the altar table, and it really wasn't too bad, except that the pews were old and everything. When we finds got pews, so but I can remember the first Sunday school class. I mean, when we first organized Sunday school, and Bessie Shore and I were in charge of the juniors, we had to have Sunday school up in the front of the sanctuary because there wasn't any other space. And I remember she said when we walked in that Sunday morning, that was the 1st September, and she said, "This could fail, couldn't it?" And I said, "Well, Bessie, with the two of us and the Lord, I think we'll see what we can do."
Wow.
But it was just all so new. But I think, and then also I can remember Bill's study. In the winter it was very cold. He had a little heater in there that was right up in the front on the left-hand side of the sanctuary. Where the altar was and so on. Just a tiny little room in there, and the elders that were helping with the service or anything, they would usually meet in there for prayer on Sunday mornings, and then they'd come out and join the service. But it was tiny when you consider. But trying to think of anything else in that line.
Well, now we do want to get into some of your activities in those early days.
Yeah.
So why don't you just talk about some of the first and things? You mentioned the deacons, the early deacons meeting in your home.
They would come usually to the apartment.
Oh, to the apartment.
Because it was 251 Beverly Road. I'll never forget it. 1-bedroom apartment. And we had no furniture particularly. Bill had a desk and a vertical file in the living room, period. And we had finally got a dining room table and had our bedroom furniture, and that was about it. But they set up folding chairs in the living room, and they'd have their meetings in there, the session. And I said I still remember cigars. I just hated that because they'd smoke, and by the time they'd finished the meeting, I'd have to open all the windows to air out the place. I said, I don't know whether anybody wants to hear about those things or not. But anyway, that's and the trustees, I think, met there too. But it was the same all the time.
Your prayers for a smoke-free environment were answered.
Oh my! I tell you, I said it's a wonder Jock grew up all right, because I said I had to air it out before we could get him to bed. Almost, it was so bad.
Oh golly!
And I know that we had the youth. Well, group of boys had come up, and it was the formation of the beginning of the first youth group, and they were helping do some jobs around the church. So Bill said, could I have them come back for lunch? And so that they'd come down to the apartment, but I said I remember I didn't have enough dishes, even everyday dishes, so I had my good Lennox out, and I was terrified they'd break my good Lennox, but I still served them chili and things like that. So
it all went well then.
All went well, and but it was just a teeny tiny apartment too. So and then let's see what else. So we started. I was in the first choir, and we weren't very great, but what we lacked with talent, we sang out anyway.
Now, who was the choir director?
Was Margaret McMichael. She played the piano, and Peggy Bauer, Bauer, was the first choir director, and I volunteer, and not. It was just a volunteer. That's right. Mm-hmm. She said I'm no real director, but she was a volunteer. And we were trying to get ready for the first Christmas, I remember, and Lo How I Rose. I still can't sing that anymore without thinking how bad we were with that, because we were always flat. And now let's see, what else?
How many were in the original choir? The first couple of months?
I wouldn't say more than 15, or
mm-hmm.
I don't think there were that many. So really quite small.
How many people would fit in that little
Oh,
church
Bill.
from Sunday?
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be probably 125, 140 at the most, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really shoehorning them in originally. And we'd put in extra chairs and probably violated all the safety or fire regulations by blocking aisles and everything else
Oh, it was terrible.
as we began to grow so quickly and so much.
We rented a pump organ once because we didn't have an organ. And where did that come from, Bill? I can't even remember where it came from, but I remember we had the two young boys, teenagers, were pumping it in the back
Back of the organ.
back of the organ, and they had to pump the thing. And Bill had a classmate, Bert Jones, came from the seminary to play for us that one Sunday, and he played Onward Christian Soldiers right away, and it took all the air out of the thing. So the poor guys were back there pumping away like mad. I remember Ed Eaton and Dr. Reynolds, Harold Reynolds, sitting on the front seat. They were laughing so hard we could hardly get them straightened out. So
They could see the boys pumping, I take it.
because they come out from behind the organ, their faces were all red and they were perspiring. So that didn't last too long anyway. And then I finally got a piano up there, and that's what we had to do. But Margaret McMichael,
No, we had piano first, and then we got this.
and then we got the organ.
No, what we did, we got an old vacuum cleaner and motorized the organ so they went at the pump.
That's right.
Didn't you hear the noise of the
Oh, it
motor?
was awful.
We put the vacuum cleaner downstairs and ran some kind of a hose on up to the floor to the back of the organ to furnish air for the thing.
My golly.
Well, I think people came because they couldn't believe these two kids were starting a church. I still say I think they came out of curiosity.
Well, for whatever reason, it worked. Now, you also mentioned some early activities. The baby in the choir loft. Does that have something to do with the choir?
Oh, no.
Or was this later?
That was much, much later,
Okay.
Bill. So
Oh,
that,
Jock was a fairly small.
well, yeah. Well, I just said our children were born in 51 and 53, and so that took care of me, most of the time.
Don't be so modest. We're very much involved.
So,
What happened with the baby in the choir loft?
well, no, it just this was much later when he was in grade school. Actually, he lost a tooth and was bleeding quite profusely. I could remember that how I thought, how can I get out of here to take care of that?
Okay.
So there's that, just little things like that. But the first strawberry festival we had in the old church, we had to bring everything. I mean, we brought strawberries. Everybody brought their own strawberries in a big bowl, and we had cakes made and so on. But at that point we had no kitchen, so we had to improvise, from the pews. It was really, but we did it for a money raising thing, and
For fellowship.
and fellowship. Oh yeah. So.
Uh-oh. Pay no attention to the telephone clicking through.
Oh.
I have no idea, but I'm not about to answer it. What were some of I got a sense of what the days were like, but did you mention Betsy Shore? Betsy Shore, who I think.
Mother, is she still a member?
Yeah, we knew them.
Oh,
Yeah. Her comment, this could fail. Did you ever have any doubts?
Well, I think I don't think so. I think we were just working so hard we didn't even think about it.
A little perspiration will get you through almost anything.
Well, I said maybe we were just so young we had no idea. I said the thing that we knew we had to pay back, presbytery, all these things. So I said, I guess we just kept going. So
in that kind of environment, what brought you the greatest joy? What sticks in your mind?
Oh, I think the people. They were great. Nothing ever was perfect as far as just things that we'd plan, like the Strawberry Festival or anything. But everybody just pitched in. It was just great. And there was a man who said you should have a bell in the steeple on the old white church. And was he with the Salvation Army, Bill?
Yeah.
And he came and brought a great, huge locomotive bell from the PNLE railroads, and it was brass, and it was so big and so heavy. They said, the trustee said, we can't get that up on top of the building. It'll break the building.
Oh my.
But there were, everybody just kind of pitched in and said, we'll do this. And then the men in the church decided they'd dig out underneath and make us a kitchen, because there was just no place to have coffee or anything like that. So that was a great project. And the one day we were getting ready for the first wedding, was it, Bill? Mm-hmm. And they were digging out, and all of a sudden somebody noticed a crack in the ceiling, and they said, "You're taking
it was in the supporting wall."
The supporting wall. So they quickly put things back in, because Bill had to get ready for this wedding.
Had to block it up again.
They had to block it all up again. There were just things like that all the time. So
did one of my questions I have down here, you might have already answered it. Is there anything you would never have shared with the congregation then, but you'd like to share now? It sounds like some of these were some of those sorts of events.
Well, there was, I think a lot of those people, I don't know. Well, no, I know the Eatons are there, but I thought some of the people would remember some of them, but I still say the making of that kitchen was really a...
To answer your question, Jim, no.
No.
We were very open, and because it's in such a small, intimate community, everybody knew everything.
Everybody knew everything. So...
one of the questions I had in the very early days, which Bill got to in his comments last week, had to do with the involvement of women in official capacities, which we seem to have been something of a leader in. Were you involved in any of that?
Oh, about the women's association.
Well, actually, we did start a women's association in the old church, in the little white church right away. I think we decided, at that time, in some churches, they had a ladies' aid and the mission group and so on. So my mother was in the Presbyterial down, the Pittsburgh Presbyterial, and an officer there. Mm-hmm. And one of her tasks was to go around to churches and help them organize a women's association. So I asked her if she would come out and talk to our women's group, which she did, and then we decided we would, form a women's association. And Bill and I were trying to remember. I thought Helen Dane, she's now Helen Paulson, I think she was one of the first presidents.
Well, they asked Dean to be the president, and she refused to. She said,
no. It was only 24 years.
None of that, but she wanted to get lay people involved, which she did, and therefore the first president was not the minister's wife, but whether it was Helen Dane, I'm not sure, but in any case, it meant that women as well as men were taking responsibilities in the church. And
and we had women elders right away.
Yeah.
So there was never any question about that.
Do you remember who might have been the first woman elder?
That would be...
Well, golly, I can think of
Mary Denman, I think, was one of the first.
Who?
Mary Denman.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to think of some of the others.
I think Helen was.
I wouldn't be surprised. Helen.
I know Jean Finley was in years later. I'm trying to think of the others. I hadn't. That's one I should have. I was wondering if any of the...
It should be in some of the session records, the old...
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Session minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, our memories are...
No, your memories are wonderful.
It's just a little hazy.
Well, let's move on a little bit to growing the church. Now, you're starting a family, and if I understood exactly what Bill was talking about, there were enormous numbers of young couples doing the same thing there in the early mid-50s. The energy had to be quite high.
Yeah, Well, that's why they decided that the first unit that was to be built when we got the Claddy property was the fellowship hall, because it built education center, because we needed something for the children, and that's why that was the first priority, was to have places for classes and the children to meet and activities and so on. So and of course that involved the folding chairs in the fellowship hall, and they had to be taken down all the time, put back up for services and so on. But we just needed the space for the children, and there were, so many. Goodness, that's why I couldn't believe somebody told me that Jefferson was no longer is a junior high or
middle school? Yeah.
I couldn't believe that. It was just always millions of kids coming in and out. So I know that that was probably the reason that started first. And then when we got to the groundbreaking, one of the things that they put all the children's name in a big hat, and we're going to draw two names, I guess, to help with the groundbreaking. And Ellen, our daughter's name, was pulled, and I said, "Oh, she can't do that." And they said, this was done fair and square. Nobody planned it. So he was allowed to help with the groundbreaking. So when we got to that point.
Well,
about Hitler.
Oh, yes, and I remember she took the shovel and she couldn't get it into the ground. And I don't know whether it was D. Hicks or just who it was. Some said, "I knew it. There's stone under there."
Oh my!
There's rock underneath that. So, but anyway, she finally got it into the ground. So, but they said it was just one of those funny things. Her name was drawn, and I said, "I can't believe it." And they said, "No, it wasn't meant to be or anything. It just happened." So
you had a group of folks at the groundbreaking, with each taking a shovel or a scoop or what have you?
It was who did we have? We had everybody was represented.
The oldest member, I think it was
Mary
Bowman.
That's right.
I don't know whether you've heard about her. She lived down on Scrubgrass Road. Had a couple cows and chickens, and had a little route there. Fred, her husband, had driven team down at the old beetling mine, and they didn't even have indoor plumbing. She was a member, however.
Mary Bowman.
Bowman, B-O-W-M-A-N.
The old folks would remember her.
My God.
Sold eggs and eggs primarily up along Bower Hill Road to a lot of the members.
And
anyhow, she helped drive, and then they wanted to get a child, since it was going to be an education unit and a fellowship hall, and that was where they did this by lot. And to our embarrassment, our daughter was the one whose name was chosen as the child.
Okay.
So those two were.
And there was another little girl, and I can't think of her name right now.
Well, how old would Mary Bowman have been?
She died in her 90s. That time she would probably been in her very late 80s.
Wow. So she would have.
She used to walk to church
climbed up to go Seeger Drive, which at that time about a 45-degree angle.
And she could walk as fast as anything.
Stood about 4 feet tall.
Wonderful.
She had quite a following of friends, too.
Come over from Wales as a little girl on a sailing ship. Quite a character.
Oh.
Well,
it was, too.
I hear your clock ringing, and my clock is ringing here. It's quite a musical time here. Now, the church, as Bill mentioned last week, quickly took on a number of mission projects. So I was interested to get your perspective on any involvement, remembrances, recollections to the Native Americans. That one really surprised me.
Tuba City.
Tuba City, yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, was a classmate of yours that was out there at the time, and we had that. Wasn't it, Bill? Wasn't Bucky out there at the time? Classmate from seminary, and he was working in that area with the Indians, and so I think that's why we felt we had some kind of personal touch with that, and Bill can tell you more about the church's involvement. I think that some of the
Oh,
kids, we packed food and
clothing
and things like that to send out.
Did you anybody ever actually go out to Tuba City?
Yes, somebody did visit there, and I'm sorry again, I cannot remember the name. But there was somebody was vacationing in Arizona, and we asked them if they would look in on it, which they did. This was way back in the very early 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on in the 60s, we of course expanded. I think we've described the work camp that down to Puerto Rico
thing.
We sent a crew of boys up to Alaska. Are Pat and Bill Nurnberg still around?
Yes, they come back. They're kind of snow bunny type.
Are they? Well, their boy, Bill Nurnberg, young Bill. Billy was one of that group, and I forget who else, but group of them we sent up to Alaska to work.
Newhams. Was that Newhams?
Kenny Newhams, I forget who all was on that one, but group of them anyhow went up and to work, helping to erect a new church up in Alaska one summer. We, let's see, we had others that groups went down to Kentucky several times to help down there.
Laser.
Yeah, Frank
drove.
Yeah, and then the Jones, they've since moved away, but they did that. Don Jones and his family went down. The whole family took a group down at least twice, maybe three times. Once down to the Ozarks and one down to Kentucky, as I remember, and worked down there helping to do construction on rebuilding churches and kind of a work camp they were organizing or heading up, and took people down. So that sort of thing was going on almost every year.
Rico was 63.
Moving into the civil rights initiative, when you all started to involve Bower Hill with some of the black churches in Pittsburgh, what was it like when families, women, started to make contact with one another?
Oh, well, I still say that was one of the high points as far as I was concerned, because the couples and the people we had from, say, the inner city, from Bidwell and Grace Memorial and all those churches were unusual. One was a couple. She was a teacher in the inner city, and he was a plumber. That was one couple, and then we had
Fred Clark.
Well, not Fred was with the detective agency, and Norm Stewart was a FBI agent.
No,
policeman, but and unusual. And people, I remember the first Sunday, somebody came up to me and said, "I met some of our new members, and they're really nice." And I thought, isn't that something? I thought one of the things we felt that nobody really knew anybody except cleaning women and custodians, and these were professionals who came, and that was one of the things we wanted to let people see, that it wasn't just cleaning women and custodians, but they had a chance to meet and really talk, and there were friendships that were started in those years that continue yet.
We had a study group that went for 2 years that preceded that. Quite a group from our church and then from the inner city churches. It was very much of an interracial one that met to study scripture for Sunday afternoons. Nearly 2 years, I guess it was.
Before the membership exchange.
Yeah, that built up to it. So that built a lot of trust. Then when it did go into being, it's marvelous where the black members were helping to teach Sunday school. Norm Stewart, for example, helped in the youth program. He also played the bass guitar, or bass fiddle, bass viol. We had a little combo orchestra, actually, that but sometimes assist in preludes and accompanying hymns, and seeing Norm up there strumming his bass was really great.
And they also had the summer, retreats and things together too. So that was another plus. So
now Bill goes and gets more heavily involved and goes off to Selma.
Oh yeah.
What was it like having a husband marching in Selma at that
They
point?
said that morning that they were all planning. Of course, he was in charge of the presbytery. What was it called? Social Education and Action Committee, and he was the chairman of that committee in the presbytery at the time. So they had a banner and everything, and they went with that, of course. And he said, "I will not go unless I want to have the backing of my church, of my session." And they did. They voted that he could go, and but that morning, I said, when I watched the TV, I took all my ironing in for about 2 weeks, and sat in front of the TV and I said, I'll never forget sitting there with the ironing and looking at they showed the road that they were going to be going down, and they played in the background, look down that lonesome road. And I said, I cried all morning, but I cried because it was necessary to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I said there was always that feeling that, there could be something that would be bad, but I thought it was necessary to be done. So, but anyway, that was the first morning of the march. So I remember that. I said I just took all my work in there, and I thought I'm just going to have to do this and keep going. So.
Now, how old would your children have been at that point in time?
That was what?
65.
65.
10, something like that?
Well, one was born in 51.
51 and 53.
Okay. So 14 and 12, and Bill, were they aware of sense of what you were doing?
Got some of the calls on the phone. People would call. We got anonymous calls and everything. So, and that's what upset me more than anything, that they would spew all this invective in a child's ear. So, but they knew what was going on. So, but I don't think we discussed that it was possibly dangerous, but it had to be done. So that was it.
Now, another thing that caught me that I didn't remember, yet I should have, was because I probably was a member by the time this occurred, was your trip to Thailand. And I understand that you did that as a family.
Because I said it's the only time we could be together as a family. It was summertime. And I said, if we do it, we'll have to do it together. So Bill actually was doing work with the Christian Education Department of the Church of Christ in Thailand. That was what it was called. But for the kids, I kept thinking, what will we do? But we just traveled along with him every place he went. And they had a big group of pictures that were done by UNICEF kids. And Sally Wiley said, I'd like to take all these pictures, and every stop we make, I'd like to put all these pictures up. They were of Bible stories and things like that, because she said they usually, their creativity is really stifled here in drawing and everything. They just are made to copy everything. And she said, I'd like them to see these lovely pictures. And so we had this great big box of pictures. How big, Bill? About 36 by 36. And we get this thing unloaded, and then in the churches where we'd stop, or wherever we'd stop, in schools, we put up all these pictures before the conference that Bill would be speaking in. And so it gave us something to do when we go to these different places. So that was fun. What
was the reaction?
Oh, yeah. And then also Sally Wiley. This is a missionary, of course, and she said, "Do you mind, you and Ellen, would you come with me to visit the women in prison in Chiang Mai?" Do you remember that, Bill?
No, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and she said that they never get any visitors, so Ellen and I went with Sally to the prison to visit the women there in the prison. So Ellen was quite a hit because she was blonde, and that was great. And Jock was quite a hit too because he had braces on his teeth, and they didn't know what those were. So,
Oh, golly.
But we had lots to do, you know. And then when Bill was speaking at the seminary, why, we stayed at a funny little hotel there, and that's where he said, "Tell about the snake." I was sitting in the lobby, and this little boy came in and said, "There's a snake beside you." And I thought, oh, he was very precocious. I'd seen him before, and I thought, oh, he's trying to get me excited. And then he went over to the desk and told the people at the desk and said, "There's a snake." And anyway, they came running, and it was one of those vipers that was wrapped around a
three-stepper, they called it.
around.
Bite you 3 steps and you drop dead.
My golly.
That was just around one of those ashtrays. He'd curled up around that. So
by her foot.
Oh dear. So, but there was. I said, I think we still measure everything that we've done by some of those things we did in Puerto Rico and Thailand. So I thought if we could come through that, we were okay. So
did you have any kind of a sense there in 1965 that Vietnam was coming? Did that have any play in it?
We were out on the Mekong, right on the Laotian border.
And there were a lot of incidents that
were going on at that time. And then the clandestine involvement of the United States government was quite apparent, where there were planes flying over across the river into Laos and over toward Vietnam. And I was quite suspicious. Thought something's happening here that we just don't know about back in the States.
Well, the Americans were building a great big road, and we came down that road.
Yeah, it was up the Burmese border, yeah.
And they said, if any car is following us, just get down, is what they said, because we're going to go like blazes. So apparently they were shooting at, you know, these things were happening. We did go over to Laos to see the Duli Hospital, and I was a little worried because I said, if we have no visas or anything for this. But anyway, we did go over, and we just spent about a half a day and then came right back. But I thought, you know, if we get caught over here, we have no visas, you know, we could, well. But that was all part of it. We were with people we thought they knew what they were doing.
Hope they did.
We hope they did.
On the way out, also to Thailand, we stopped and spent time with all of our personal interest missionaries we could, and visited all of the places where the Presbyterian Church has programs going on for missionaries.
Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan.
You had quite a trip. You had quite a trip.
Oh, all summer. Mm-hmm.
It was as soon as school was out. That was in June, and then we got back just before school started in September. So it was a long time. And I said we only got in back to Bangkok, you know, for a little, about 2 days R&R before we could start out again to another little village. We did leper colonies and all the rest.
Way up in the, tell them about the leper colony way down in the southern part of Thailand.
Yeah, Khonsi Thammarat, yeah.
They had asked me to bring my bagpipes, so this apparently made quite a hit, and also was quite an icebreaker at different places. In fact, what had never happened before, in the case of some of the Laotian boys, and the Karen boys from Burma would bring their native pipes out, which they'd never done before, apparently, because I was playing the pipes. In any case, we were down almost to the Malaysian border, a little village called Nakhon Si Thammarat. There's a big leper hospital down there. Leprosy at that time, and still is, very common. And part of my kind of little icebreaker and spiel each time was allow kids particularly to have an attempt to try to play the pipes. So they'd blow and puff and so forth. Anyhow, I was down there, and kids in the leper hospital were trying to play the pipes, and we were coming back on the narrow gauge railway winding and clanking and chugging our way on up into the interior of Thailand again. And what was it you were?
I was just plain sick.
Oh, you picked up some kind of a bug down there.
And the only thing I could eat was Coca-Cola or fried rice. That's the only thing we felt was safe. And I remember I couldn't finish my Coke, and Bill took my straw out and put his straw in, and I said, "What do you think I have?" After he'd given his pipes to all these lepers and everything, I thought, my God.
He's never allowed me to forget that before.
So no, they kept saying, don't. You'd walk through this train banging around, and they'd say, "Don't touch any of the monks." They were all, these trains are all filled with saffron-robed monks, and because they have to go through all this washing and everything if they touch a woman. And I thought, now that's a nice thing for me. I have to be careful of them that I don't touch them when I'm lurching around in this train. So it was oh my.
What kind of, with your travels and various involvements, did you get a sense of how the women in the church kind of viewed you, Jane?
I think they pitied me, really. It's taken on all these things, and I said the Puerto Rican trip wasn't any doozy. I'll tell you, we worked like mad on that, and went through caves and everything else because Don Dodge thought we should have all these little extra perks on the weekends, and he'd take us on these wild trips. And
well, you were doing a good job at your teaching, though, with your limited.
Well, yeah, we went down. That the whole gist of it was we did Bible study. Bible school with the villages. We'd go out into the mountains, and each one of us was responsible for another little section, and we'd have games and crafts and things like that. And my Spanish was so bad, but Lindy Evans was really good. And I said, "Lindy, help me," and she would teach me the night before how to talk to the kids, like "Mira me," to look at me,
mm-hmm.
And then they would all look at me, and I would show them how to cut something out, And then I said the trouble was they all came at me with Spanish afterwards, and I still couldn't tell what they were saying.
You did a good job.
But anyway, the kids did a terrific job. All the kids knew Spanish, and that went with us. That was kind of a prerequisite. They had to have some knowledge of Spanish, and some of them really good. And so they made contact with the kids so well. So, and I said my biggest job there was the kitchen, I think, because we were supposed to be divided up into cooks for certain days, and nobody knew how to cook. It was just, I thought, we'll all die here. So I got called every time we had a meal. How do you do this and how do you do that? We had two great big garbage cans. One for flour and one for sugar, because the cockroaches were so bad that we had to keep them in something, and we had to kill our own chickens to have chicken. I can remember that. They thought we were terrible to kill the chickens, but I said, if we're going to have chicken, that's the only way we're going. The 4-H group would sell us chickens, and so we had to. Bob Maxwell, his parents may still be there, I don't know, but Bob Maxwell was one of them.
Now, who thought you were terrible to kill the chickens?
Oh, our gang.
Your gang.
They were from the suburbs.
Yes.
The only time they ever saw chicken was in the store wrapped up in a package. So we had to start from scratch, and Bill killed them. He cut their heads off, and I can remember Sharon thought he was so terrible to do that. And then Bob Maxwell and I got the job of cleaning them. And I said, all I can remember, Bob, is that my grandmother used to have boiling water, and then that's how we got the feathers out. So, and so we sat down. It took us all morning long to get those chickens cleaned, and then we had to cook them. But I said, I think that was worse than Thailand, really. The amount. And then, the kids would get sick with, some of the, what was, diarrhea and all that kind of thing. So, we were there 6 weeks. It wasn't just a week or something. We were there 6 weeks.
Right.
So, but I think everybody came back with a feeling, that it was where, in fact, one of the girls, Sharon, stayed on for 2 weeks after that, as the rest of us went home, and she had asked her parents if she could stay on. So it was, and we had to wash our own clothes and hang them up and do all the work. And we lived in casetas, which had no windows, so the birds flew in and out, insects and everything else. So it was, that is very vivid in my mind. You could probably tell.
Now that had to have a profound effect on those children, the young people that went along.
Well, we heard we heard one of the ladies told us that her daughter had said it was one of the most wonderful summers she had ever had in her life. And she was one of the ones who said she couldn't eat when we got there because there were so many flies. And she said, I can't eat. I just can't eat. And I said, well, if you can't, I think we're going to have some problems. But, and they tried to spray. They tried to keep us fairly healthy, but, it wasn't an easy place to be. It was very hot and humid and lots of flies.
What was the name of the location again?
Oh, El Guacio.
Can you spell it?
L, capital Guacio.
El Guacio.
Guacio.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the interior of the island of Puerto Rico, not near any big town. The nearest village was called Las Marias, L-A-S, capital M-A-R-I-A-S. And the nearest town would probably be Mayagüez, which would be 50, 60 miles away.
Yeah.
A good day's drive from San Juan.
Southeast of that. But very primitive. Rural slum is what I would call it. But they had a clinic there, and that's why it was such an outpost. It was really great for
the only medical care for that entire center of the island, that part.
They had a 4-H project, clinic, and then
the church they'd started there too. The church had gone in and really pioneered with not only worship place, but also all the social needs, trying to meet all of those as well.
So,
let's move, if we might, to a section I'm going to call the future. We're trying to get a sense of today. We experience pretty dramatic change. It's ongoing, and I'm wondering, as your time passed at Bower Hill, it was a considerable amount of time. Did the church change at all as across the span of your ministry?
You're talking about Bower Hill?
Bower Hill Church. Bower Hill, the people. Did you notice anything, or was anything apparent?
I don't think anything particularly unique, differing from what the society as a whole was experiencing, especially during the tumultuous times of the 60s, which, as you know, just were frightful as the nation was imploding with all of or exploding, I suppose, with all of the racial and social issues, especially with the concern for voting rights and equal justice for black people.
I can't remember to think if there was anything.
I think one of the things we're grappling with today is, in those early years, the vast majority of members, of course, were young.
Yeah.
Young families. Mm-hmm. Would you have ever foreseen at that point in time, I think I asked you this question last week, Joe, that better than half, close to 75% of the membership would be 50 or older?
I'm not surprised, and we didn't really talk about it or think about it that much, but the demographic changes in neighborhoods throughout Pittsburgh was beginning at that time. For example, Wilkinsburg, where Jean's parents continued to live, was starting to undergo changes there, where the generation that was Gene's age and my age was moving out further on out to Penn Hills or elsewhere, and the areas around Beachview and some of the areas around Mount Washington, Mount Oliver, and so forth. People were, and the South Side were streaming on out, and that was those were turning into aging neighborhoods. And I thought at the time, not deeply or frequently, but this possibly would be happening or could be happening to the area of Mount Lebanon and Scott Township, which was the primary feeding area for church membership for Bower Hill.
What schools are in operation now?
Oddly enough, they're all back in operation.
They're all back in operation. Okay.
Jefferson closed down for 10 years, and then came the balloon of the baby boomers. And at the same time period, they had closed Mellon Junior High School, and it's now reopened, refurbished and reopened. Now, there are no new schools, but of course, I guess it was in the early 70s, they added 2 floors or so to the high school. I can't remember quite exactly how much. But during the time period when Jefferson and Mellon were closed, the middle schools were held in the high school, were combined with the high school.
That seems amazing to me.
Yeah. There was this dip in the curve, and it kind of corresponded with the war years, probably, or just preceding the war years, World War II. With all these experiences, Jane, can you imagine being 30-something again and doing it all over?
Oh my! I know somebody asked John Galbraith, who they had started about 3 years ahead of us, and they started with a school, though. They were in a Westminster Church. They started in a school, but somebody asked him once, would he be ever willing to start another church? He says, is there more than one church in a person? And that's kind of, I said, we started out, I don't think we had any idea all the things we were going to meet. We just, I said we were so young, we didn't know. So we just kept on.
Do you think it would make any difference today with the profusion of family styles from 2 career parents and working moms and single parents and all that? Would it have made a difference in how you went about what you did?
Oh, well,
certainly.
I'm sure it would. I'm sure it would, because, of course, then women weren't working like that. I said, I just worked along with my husband, never even unquestioned it, but even by the late 60s, women were going back and getting degrees and going ahead teaching. I remember one of our elders did that because she said, I think what I'm going to do is go back and get a degree and teach in a inner city school. And she felt that was her mission. And so I thought, a lot of the women were beginning to rethink their feelings about it too. And I thought, I'd like to be able to do that. So actually, when Bill went to the seminary, I got as far as getting my transcripts ready, thinking I'll do that.
This is when I left Bower Hill.
When you left Bower Hill in 68. And, but I never did get to go through with that. But I remember now I went to Bidwell to church then.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bill said, you can't stay here because the organizing pastor's wife. And I said, I know that. I know that wouldn't be a good thing. So I called Jim Robinson and asked him if it would be okay for me to come and be, a volunteer member at that time. So I went over there for 4 years to Bidwell, to church. And because I just felt I shouldn't stay at Bower Hill because they'd be getting new minister and wife and so on. And I thought that will be their thing then.
Sure.
So,
and given the future, what would you like to hear that Bower Hill did with its future?
Well, I, you're involved in the South Hills Ministries.
Yes. Yes, still. Yep.
And I thought, I remember Evelyn Mason's reports on those things. Periodically I'd hear them in the paper or see them in the news and so on. And I thought, there's still lots of work to be done, through the city. So I thought, it looks to me like you're pretty much involved with things going on in the those areas.
Looking at it a slightly different way, and this is really with your perspective of participation in a very diverse life. What do you look for in judging either a church or a program or even a personal relationship? How do you qualify something in your own mind as having been successful?
Oh, I think if they're doing something for the betterment of the community, if they've shown some light somewhere to somebody, at least I think even in the churches up here, if I would be very much upset if they weren't involved in the homeless programs and things like that, because I think that's what we're here for.
In other words, faithfulness to Jesus Christ.
That's right. And I thought any year should be, that it may not be the same way we did it, and it may be other ways, but I think that there's certainly enough problems everywhere. I said in every church we've been in, they've all been a different problem, but you try to address the things that that are meaningful and for the betterment of the lives of the people in the church, as far as helping them see what's the world around them. I think if it doesn't turn outward, then it's not really the church, actually. So I've been really gratified. I was afraid we were coming to a place, where they're just going to worship their little buildings up here, but it's not so. At least in every one, there are good programs for there's so much homelessness up here. I'm amazed. I'm really amazed. So, and food banks and things like that all the time.
Did you, by any chance, happen to have seen the wonderful press coverage we got here in Pittsburgh last week?
Oh, we just got it today.
Now,
today.
Did you got the article from the
Wendy sent me a copy, then the woman from Post-Gazette sent me a copy.
Wonderful. Now, that's the one on the history of the 50-year celebration.
Yeah.
In the almanac, did you see the article in the almanac on our children?
What's the almanac?
Yeah, what's the almanac?
South Hills Almanac is another newspaper.
No, we did not see that.
No, I haven't.
Post-Gazette, the South Hills, or whatever it is, the South, for the Pittsburgh Southern Suburbs edition.
Okay.
That's all we got.
There's another article.
Yes,
on our teens, and they tried a night trying to simulate being homeless. Living in a cardboard box, out in the elements, that sort of thing. See if I can't find somebody to.
That was in the same paper.
No, it's in the same. It happened to be in the same week, but a different newspaper.
I see. Okay.
And so we've received some wonderful coverage in the last 2 weeks. But the homeless continues to be a fairly significant focus here also.
Oh, yes, goodness. Well, you get the idea this is just a nice tourist place, but I said after the tourists go, you find people in the woods,
Yeah.
in whatever they can find. And I think it's really a sad, sad thing.
Well, this has been a wonderful
Well, you're
conversation.
very kind.
It's been delightful.
You were too, Jim.
You're excellent. I'm so sorry. I wish my mind were working better.
Well, your minds are working wonderfully. Believe me, you've shared a great deal, and it's going to be wonderful for people to hear it.
Oh,
So let me turn the deck off for just a moment.
okay.
Okay.